Chapter 11 of Planet of the Damned. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by November 8 Echo Victor Victor. Planet of the Damned by Harry Harrison. Chapter 11. Facing the silent Dissons, Brien's thoughts hurtled about in sweeping circles. There would be no more than an instant's tick of time before the magter avenged themselves bloodily and completely. He felt a fleeting regret for not having brought his gun, then abandoned the thought. There was no time for regrets. What could he do now? The silent watchers hadn't attacked instantly, and Brien realized that they couldn't be positive yet that Lig Magda had been killed. Only Brien himself knew the deadliness of that blow. Their lack of knowledge might buy him a little more time. Lig Magda is unconscious, but he will revive quickly, Brien said, pointing to the huddled body. As the eyes turned automatically to follow his finger, he began walking slowly towards the exit. I did not want to do this, but he forced me to, because he wouldn't listen to reason. Now I have something else to show you, something that I hoped it would not be necessary to reveal. He was saying the first words that came into his head, trying to keep them distracted as long as possible. He must appear to be only going across the room. That was the feeling he must generate. There was even time to stop for a second and straighten his rumpled clothing and brush the sweat from his eyes. Talking easily, walking slowly towards the hall that led out of the chamber. He was halfway there when the spell broke and the rush began. One of the magter knelt and touched the body and shouted a single word. "Dead!" Brien hadn't waited for the official announcement. At the first movement of feet, he dived headlong for the shelter of the exit. There was a spatter of tiny missiles on the wall next to him, and he had a brief glimpse of raised blowguns before the wall intervened. He went up the dimly lit stairs 3 at a time. The pack was just behind him, voiceless and deadly. He could not gain on them. If anything, they were closing the distance as he pushed his already tired body to the utmost. There was no subtlety or trick he could use now, just straightforward flight back the way he had come. A single slip on the irregular steps, and it would be all over. There was someone ahead of him. If the woman had waited a few seconds more, he would certainly have been killed, but instead of slashing at him as he went by the doorway, she made the mistake of rushing to the center of the stairs, the knife ready to impale him as he came up. Without slowing, Brien fell onto his hands and easily dodged under the blow. As he passed, he twisted and seized her around the waist, picking her from the ground. When her legs lifted from under her, the woman screamed, the first human sound Brien had heard in this human anthill. His pursuers were just behind him, and he hurled the woman into them with all his strength. They fell in a tangle, and Brien used the precious seconds gained to reach the top of the building. There must have been other stairs and exits, because one of the magter stood between Brien and the way down out of this trap, armed and ready to kill him if he tried to pass. As he ran towards the executioner, Brien flicked on his collar radio and shouted into it, "I'm in trouble here, can you—" The guards in the car must have been waiting for this message. Before he had finished, there was the thud of a high-velocity slug hitting flesh, and the Disson spun and fell, blood soaking his shoulder. Brien leaped over him and headed for the ramp. "This next one is me. Hold your fire," he called. Both guards must have had their telescopic sights zeroed on the spot. They let Brien pass, then threw in a hail of semi-automatic fire that tore chunks from the stone and screamed away in noisy ricochets. Brien didn't try to see if anyone was braving this hail of covering fire. He concentrated his energies on making as quick and erratic a descent as he could. Above the sounds of the firing, he heard the car motor howl as it leaped forward. With their careful aim spoiled, the gunners switched to full automatic and unleashed a hailstorm of flying metal that bracketed the top of the tower. "Cease firing!" Brian gasped into the radio as he ran. The driver was good and timed his arrival with exactitude. The car reached the base of the tower at the same instant Brian did, and he burst through the door while it was still moving. No orders were necessary. He fell headlong onto a seat as the car swung in a dust-raising turn and ground into high gear back to the city. Reaching over carefully, the tall guard gently extracted a bit of pointed wood and fluff from a fold of Brian's pants. He cracked open the car door and just as delicately threw it out. "I knew that thing didn't touch you," he said, "since you're still among the living. They've got a poison on those blowgun darts that takes all of 12 seconds to work. Lucky." Lucky? Brian was beginning to realize just how lucky he was to be out of the trap alive. And with information. Now that he knew more about the magter, he shuddered at his innocence in walking alone and unarmed into the tower. Skill had helped him survive, but better than average luck had been necessary. Curiosity had gotten him in, brashness and speed had taken him out. He was exhausted, battered and bloody, but cheerfully happy. The facts about the magter were arranging themselves into a theory that might explain their attempt at racial suicide. It just needed a little time to be put into shape. A pain cut across his arm and he jumped, startled, pieces of his thoughts crashing into ruin around him. The gunner had cracked the first aid box and was swabbing his arm with antiseptic. The knife wound was long, but not deep. Brian shivered while the bandage was going on, then quickly slipped into his coat. The air conditioner whined industriously, bringing down the temperature. There was no attempt to follow the car. When the black tower had dropped over the horizon, the guards relaxed, ran cleaning rods through their guns, and compared marksmanship. All of their antagonism towards Brian was gone. They actually smiled at him. He had given them the first chance to shoot back since they had been on this planet. The ride was uneventful, and Brian was scarcely aware of it. A theory was taking form in his mind. It was radical and startling, yet it seemed to be the only one that fitted the facts. He pushed at it from all sides, but if there were any holes he couldn't find them. What it needed was dispassionate proving or disproving. There was only one person on Dis who was qualified to do this. Leah was working in the lab when he came in, bent over a low-power binocular microscope. Something small, limbless, and throbbing was on the slide. She glanced up when she heard his footsteps, smiling warmly when she recognized him. Fatigue and pain had drawn her face. Her skin, glistening with burn ointment, was chapped and peeling. "I must look a wreck," she said, putting the back of her hand to her cheek. "Something like a well-oiled and lightly cooked piece of beef." She lowered her arms suddenly and took his hand in both of hers. Her palms were warm and slightly moist. "Thank you, Brian," was all she could say. Her society on Earth was highly civilized and sophisticated, able to discuss any topic without emotion and without embarrassment. This was fine in most circumstances, but it made it difficult to thank a person for saving your life. However you tried to phrase it, it came out sounding like a last act speech from a historical play. There was no doubt, however, as to what she meant. Her eyes were large and dark, the pupils dilated by the drugs she had been given. They could not lie, nor could the emotions he sensed. He did not answer, just held her hand an instant longer. "How do you feel?" he asked, concerned. His conscience twinged as he remembered that he was the one who had ordered her out of bed and back to work today. "I should be feeling terrible," she said with an airy wave of her hand. "But I'm walking on top of the world. I'm so loaded with painkillers and stimulants that I'm high as the moon. All